ladies and gentlemen, we are not entirely done with the quarterfinals. However, I felt it would be necessary at this point to cover what we have seen so far. And I'm going to be honest, it is. I was a bit wrong. To say the least, I was a bit wrong, unfortunately. So let's go straight into it. LNG versus Weibo, I called this a 3-0 for LNG. Now, my reasoning was that LNG, they looked like real contenders. These guys were way ahead of the meta compared to everyone else. Like, I love the way they were drafting their comps. They already were pulling out Galio mid. Like, everything seemed really solid. It really did. And then for Weibo, naturally they had to go to the last round to even make it. They played against DK, who were pretty much dead in the water by then. But Weibo still had to fight through it. They had a lot of battles. They had to figure themselves out. I will say, and I knew this, that Xiaohu and Light were playing rather well. Breathe was actually playing a bit better than anticipated, and their top support were a little bit, but still, like, their top support were like a little bit not entirely there, to be honest. And because that team could just randomly lose games for no reason, and they could be pretty dumb at times, I figured, okay, LNG just looks so good, surely they'll win. Now, here's the thing, and I'm gonna be honest. This is harder to predict, but it is something you can definitely include when you're assessing, like, a series. There's two things, okay? There's two things. First off, LNG had 2 weeks. 2 weeks off since they won their matches. And that's a lot of time. And I'll be honest, anyone that is, like, competed in esports, I think it's a little bit different for sports. Maybe not maybe not entirely. But I know for at least esports standards, taking a long break sucks. Like, they had so much momentum, LNG, from the Swiss stage, that I guarantee you, if we were able to cover these games quicker, and let's say it was only a 1 week turnaround, LNG would look better. But because so much time passed, you get into your head, you're trying to think of counters, you're looking at, like, what other teams are playing, you're scrimming all the time, and sometimes you just kind of lose your edge. Like, it can happen. You can just lose your edge. And that for sure happened a bit in this series. Like, it's very hard to argue against the fact that LNG definitely lost some of their edge. And Scout looked like a 1v9 mid laner. Seriously, he looked so damn good. He didn't look like that. He made some really bad mistakes in this series. And yeah, just looking at the drafts, like, Weibo versus LNG, they did their bans. Sylas, in terms of, like, how the meta is shaping up, Sylas has become a much higher priority pick at this point. Their first draft is, like, okay. The only thing is, you're going to notice, and one thing everyone knows from watching Light, this guy's Ashe is just next level. Like, it's actually so incredible how good he is at this pick. And this is always going to be an issue when you see this in draft. Naturally, Skarner, like, a very, very strong pick, annoying to deal with. Nocturne, not exactly happy to play into Skarner, but I guess you have Ahri and you're playing with a Nocturne combo to try to find something. Right? Like, that's kind of how they're going for it. And Gala, like, this is another thing I feel like teams are missing at this point, and why I felt like LNG was kind of falling off what's actually right for the meta. Because in the beginning of the meta, Jhin was a huge pick. Okay? Like, this was, like, the pick to get. Jhin, right? Also, I'm going to change the color of this so it's a little bit easier to see. There. So Jhin was a huge pick, right? Jhin. The problem is that teams are starting to realize that their ADs are so damn good. Like, they're so damn good that you should play these skilled-based AD carries, because you'll get so much more out of them. Like, Jhin, you can only get so much out of that pick. It just does its thing. Yeah, like, some of these players are better than others with their skill shots, but you can only do so much with Jhin. And Ezreal, a good Ezreal can absolutely break a team fight, break a game from just outplays. And we saw that throughout the entire quarterfinal so far. This has been very apparent, right? MF, another pick that just kind of falls a little flat. Yes, you can do some stuff, but it falls a little flat. But then we have Ashe. You could definitely do shit with Ashe, for sure. And, these kinds of picks just keep rising up. And, but they're on the Jin side. Like, they're still looking at the Jin because that's just what they think they want to play into the Ashe. Also, Kaisa, another really big stellar pick that is thriving and like pushing in. And I feel like they just forgot about this a little bit. We could get Gala and Ezreal here, and it was like, awesome. Okay, this actually works. And it's a pick that you would normally take into Ashe if it was the previous meta. We have Yone, Sejuani, Jax. Okay, pretty solid. Pretty solid overall, And then you finish with this. Cool. All right. So that was like not a half bad like turnaround by LNG. The first game, not the greatest. You go into the third game, we're back on the Nocturne Ahri Jax, but this time the enemy is no Skarner, right? Still get Ashe, they have a Braum. And so naturally, the first thing you should think, and this is like for them to be able to have a turnaround, right? We're on Kaisa, we actually adapted away from the Jin, okay. We have the Kaisa, they picked Braum. Is there no other pick they can think of for playing to Ashe Braum if they feel like they're taking Kaisa? Is there no magical bot lane picks that they have, like playing like Bard or something, to actually like play a ranged pick into Bard and expose him? No? I mean, like we have Callista as well as another pick, Varus as another pick. You could try to go Renata with these kinds of things. There's so many interesting options, and we landed with Kaisa Alistar, who can have no ability to lane against this, by the way. Absolutely no ability to lane against this. And it was not fun. It really wasn't. And naturally, I don't think, like, they banned LeBlanc Brand, by the way. I feel like they should have banned some preference junglers, because that probably would have helped them a lot more with dealing with, like, the Nocturne just jumping in and running into this shit. But even then, that wasn't, like, the biggest issue when it really came to it for this game. Like, by the time we got to game 3 plus, their team fighting was so atrocious. It was so bad. Like, there was a moment, and I believe this is the game, that Orianna had a terrible build path. Just to say that, Jahu built the classic, what was it, Seraphs into Leandries into Zonias. And I can tell you right now, if you're ever doing this build path where you're not including your pen or decap in the third slot, you're going to be real late. Like, the Ahri had those items by their 4 items, and they're actually stronger than the Ori. However, regardless of that, so the game is actually in a really good spot for LNG. It really was, regardless of the fact that I don't really care for Alistar. And, this could be a little spicy if you have a 1-2-3. They had a fight where Weibo was pulling Baron, and Scout flash charms the Orianna, who has stopwatch. And they blew everything on the Ori who had stopwatch, couldn't kill him. They lost the fight, the game was over. That was it. The game was literally over within that time frame. And it's like, are you serious? No way, right? But that's how it went down. And then by the time we get to the 4th game, okay, cool. We have we have a trio, which is pretty reasonable, okay? Pretty reasonable trio. We have a Yone, a Renekton, a Sejuani. Renekton could beat the Jax. Yone can technically beat the Aura, though it's a hard lane. And we have a Seju. Okay. But then we go back on the Jax, because Kaisa, Ashe, Ezreal, and Callista are all removed. They literally had nothing else they could really play into this. So we picked the Jin Nautilus. So now Gala can't even do what he wants to do. Like, that ended up being so bad. At this point, like, I almost would rather them to just roll out the Xayah Rakan. Or sorry, they couldn't even roll out Xayah Rakan because they took Rakan away, so they didn't feel like they wanted to pick Xayah, right? Like, what else would they even take? MF? MF is a pick you would take into Ezreal, typically. Like, MF probably would have been better in many ways. But it's just, going back on the Jhin, it just didn't feel right. And their team fighting in this game was so bad. It was so bad. Like, I don't know. It's just so hard to imagine that this was the LNG from what we saw in Swiss to playing now. And so that's the second thing I want to bring up, in that Nymera, he's a LPL caster, watches a ton of LPL. Honestly, when it comes to outside LPL thoughts, like, it's probably not necessarily the best, but obviously inside LPL, especially because he's seen these two teams play against each other and they've had so many matches against each other, he said that, like, this is how it goes. Like, LNG actually is a bit more of a flipper, like a team that flips around. And I did not think that was going to happen based on the Swiss stage, but it did. So props to him to kind of eyeing that, like, this may be a lot closer than you thought. And it turned out it was a lot worse. not even close. It was a lot worse than I thought. So yeah, that is a solid. And I'm gonna, for this, so I was counting 1 point per game score being correct. I'm gonna say it's 2 points because it's a best of 3. So that's a solid 0 out of 3 for the first one. Really rough. That's a really rough start. I wasn't even remotely close on this. This series is closer. It's still an 0-3 though. Like, I still went 0-3 on my predictions for this because I said it was going to be 3-2 HLE. And my reasoning was more that, honestly, I thought they were going to be able to do it because of Viper. Like, Elk was, like, slowly vamping in Swiss, but I feel like he still was not nearly where he should be form-wise. And Viper was, like, the man. Like, he literally was the man. And Doran has a history of at least being able to deal with some of these top laners. So I thought, surely, like, okay, I'm not expecting him to beat Bin. Surely he would be able to not even contain Bin, but just, like, be okay. Like, just do okay, you know? And for the mid matchup, it varies. You know, both players can be good. And Peanut is, like, a solid jungler. And Delight is great. Like, Delight is great. So, and Honest had kind of, like, an off, like, performance so far. So I thought surely that would mean something, right? But it comes to the first rule again. HLE had 1 week. They had 1 week break. And BLG kind of went through the ringer and did a lot of, like, matches to get where they are. And so, like, BLG started slow, right? Like, they started slow in Swiss, and then they had to go through these battles, and they kind of helped them learn, you know? Like, it kind of helped them get off their feet and figure stuff out a little bit more. And in the end of the day, it probably is a blessing that they didn't go 3-0, because if BLG 3-0'd while struggling, which, I mean, HLE 3-1, but they were, again, it was kind of like a struggle to get through the 3-1. And I think BLG having to go through that was really beneficial. Like, having that tight match versus G2, I think they learned a lot from that. I think they did. So they were a lot closer to getting to, like, their actual good form than I anticipated. I knew they would be good. Naturally, I knew Bin was, like, on top of shit. Like, I knew that, and that's why I was hoping Doran would at least do okay, because Bin is, like, been the man this entire tournament, and it wasn't 100% where Elk would be. Knight would be good, and yeah, it was a lot worse. And I think partially it's just because I still feel like HLE really did not learn a lot. Obviously, for one, Bin literally put Doran in the dumpster. Like, it was not easy by any means for Doran to do anything. So the fact that Bin did that, yeah, the game was, like, infinitely easier than need be. 2, you know, Silas became a real, again, we noticed that the Silas parity has been going up, and this became, like, even more evident in this series, especially for what happened in the 3rd game. But, like, we have Silas, we have Gnar, and it's like, okay, Gnar's a really solid pick. He's able to do his thing. Poppy, cool. You know, we got the Ezreal, the MF into the Ezreal. Wasn't enough. Okay, whatever. We move past that. We go into game 2. We get a Yone first pick. It's like, okay, Yone first pick, Knight, really solid. We get Skarner, Gnar. You know, Gnar has been pretty pivotal for the Doran show. Like, he really needs this to actually do anything. Back on that Rumble. This time it went a lot better. Ari, Zyracon. Okay, nice. We're getting Elk on some real shit. And it's a very simple, straightforward lane for them in the bot lane. And this is, like, where Elk kind of starts just putting, like big time performances in. Like, Elk was, yeah, he's there now. Like, after this series, I think it's very clear to me now that he is back in form. He is ready to go. and Knight was doing a great job too. So this team is very legit. Like, they went from a team that was kind of struggling to clear out their contender. And based on how Weibo plays and or BLG's format plus their players, BLG will probably beat Weibo, and BLG will be in the finals, the world's finals. That is probably where this direction is going to go at this point. And, we go further down. And I would say right now, HLE really screwed up. And I say they screwed up because they just did not play nearly well enough around Viper. Viper was the man. I can't even, if you watch these games, Elk was playing way better than, compared to his Swiss stage. And Viper was playing as expected at an incredible level. He is for sure looks like the best AD carry in this league, in this tournament. If you gave him, just players who played around him better, comps that are built, better around him, I guarantee you he will win you the game. He's just that good. I don't know what else to say. Because in this game, he was still actually not bad. Zeripick's not necessarily the greatest, to be honest, but he was really good movement-wise. But holy shit, this game, Knight absolutely tore them apart. Because HLE were actually winning this game. It was very steady. It's kind of like how you watched Genji, they were steadily building their leads, and BLG couldn't really do anything. The difference between this game and this game is that BLG kind of steadily built their leads, but the tools for HLE to actually go in and make something happen was way worse. This is why I said this draft was not necessarily the greatest, because Xayah is naturally an anti-dive champ, right? You have a frontliner and good side laners, so pressing in with Alistar, Ahri, Gnar, and Skarner, you need flanks, right? You need flanks. But your top laner is kind of losing, and this is really hard to get this going too. And so it's on to Light to find the situations, and even Peanut at times, and they just did it. They just kind of threw their bodies straight forward. It was really stupid how they were doing it, and so they lost. This was not a really close game, and neither was this to a certain point. They were steadily in the lead until a drastic, horrible mistake after bot tier 1, where they're just kind of too far out there, and BLG catches them with a TP flank. I think it's by Bin, and they kill them, and they start turning around. Then it became really, really rough because Wukong was just always on Zeri, couldn't do anything, and yeah, the game just kind of fell apart for HLE. And Knight, like I said, Knight had some insane gameplay on Sylas that. Probably one of the best Sylas games ever seen for a pro play. For a pro match, especially against the level of players in this. And then we get to this last game, and this is the banger. This is the one of the best games in World's history. Honestly, a lot of people will think, no way. In World's history, no way. But it's true, and I say that because the level, it's not necessarily the macro, because there's definitely issues with certain macro ideas and the timing of certain fights. But it's the heroic plays in the fighting that each player was delivering that was just next level. It's just so hard to find. It's so hard to get to see that on a day-to-day level, or day-to-day in any league, and they delivered. Sylas had some moments. Elk had his insane moments. We had the double Galio ultis. It was so good. It really was. It was so good. And a lot of it came down to the fact that HLE didn't know how to play around Viper. Viper who? Seriously, they didn't play around him. In this game, multiple times, Dorn needs to literally just go and defend. He just needs to defend Viper. He needs to not try to make a hero play, but he tried to keep doing it, and it kept going badly. And every single time he did that, Elk just killed him. You could never touch Elk. Elk killed him, and then Elk went in forward. So this series was pretty fucking close in some senses, in that you know, we had a very back and like we had very very clear signs that HLE were capable of winning this. They were. They for sure were capable of winning this series. But BLG just outclassed them in these fights. They really did. They just outclassed them. And once they got the lead, it was just hard to play. And I have to say, like, it's just really impressive by them. So I'm not very sad because these two series were series that I said were going to be more coin flippy. I thought I was more sure on this, but this was not right. So 0-3, 0-3, and then this is just 1 out of 3. It's just 1 out of 3, and that's mostly because, there we go. That's mostly because, well, it wasn't, TES couldn't take one game. And I did say, and I honestly, everything I said about these teams did come true in this series. What I said in this was that Zayas would have a clear advantage over 369, right? This was very apparent. And they were even testing this in the pick and ban. Like, if you go to these pick and bans for today, look in the first one. They take Rumble 1 pick with a Narban, okay? They take Silas Sejuani, so they're testing the Silas priority, right? And how good it can be. They take Trist, so they can actually play and ruin the Silas, which I think was reasonable, sure. They take Camille. We used to know that Camille was a counter to Rumble. It's not a true counter, just to say that right now. Rumble does so much damage that he can definitely melt Camille, and that can be a problem. However, I assume that T1 would try to play more carries in top to outclass 369. In the end of the day, T1 just ran circles with them in the side lanes, and that was kind of it, man. Like, it was so hard for TES to get anything going because they did not have any dragons to pull T1 off from the sides to force drag fights because there was no soul for them to pressure. So they couldn't get anywhere, and then naturally the Camille's just getting stronger and stronger, and TES played around mid jungle really badly. Honestly, in this game, like, these two really did not play well around each other, especially with also their support, Leo. Like, it just didn't work that well. And so they took over the game. And Kyria, like, his Bard, oh my god, it was such a menace. It was beyond obnoxious for them to deal with. So T1 won this draft. Like, they won this draft off how their individual players' strengths are. Let's say that. That's how they won. Now, was another thing I said. I said this meta is good for Faker. It's a Faker meta. Why? Because he's getting away from having to play these, like, Triss Corki matchups and all that. This is so much better for him to be playing Ahri, to play things that can, like, wait to make him play and have those turn moments. Like, those situations Faker knows really well. And it's turning out really well for them. It really is. And he found a lot of really good picks. I think it's in the second game. Yeah, as Ahri, he found a lot of good situations where he's just waiting in the brush. Someone walks up, he gets a chunk. It turned out really well. You know, test the Silas. You know, they take Rumble Rakan. It's actually not bad at all for Silas already. So it's like, okay. They take Ezreal. So because they kind of anticipate it's going to be Isaiah. They take Rel. And then we take a Renekton Cassante bet. And so this is where, again, they're testing the whole 369 theory, where it's like, we took your Rumble away. Nar's already banned. So if we ban these two, those are his 4 picks. Those are all 369's 4 picks that he, like, always plays. So what else is, yeah, the Galio. And you know, the Galio is a very solid pick into Rumble. Like, this is good in his individual matchup. It's not that good against the enemy team, because Zaya's already, like, an anti-dive champion, and you already have champions that are, like, outside of Ezreal, like, he kind of wants to go in, he wants to go in. Okay, Zaya's feeling pretty good. Now we're going even more in, and then we have a Viego to try to help curve out some of the situations overall. And then they take an Ahri, and people think, oh shit, isn't this really bad? Because, like, they have Silas. Like, he has a lot of good ultis, and it's true. He has this, he has this, he has this. He has, like, he literally has 4 out of 5, like, stellar ultis to take to play the game. and you toss in a Galio. But the thing is, like that, the Ezreal needs to do work. Like he has to do work because if you're just standing on standby and you try to run in, it's not like you're not gonna do anything to Xayah. The Xayah is gonna pull back. She's gonna rip you apart, and you're dead, and that's it. And so yeah, a lot of it rested on JackeyLove, and he did actually do pretty well, to be honest. Like I actually think he was putting out and doing pretty well in this game, but unfortunately, you know, like the TES just couldn't get anything going. They played better around mid jungle. Like Faker was destroying the Sylas, which should happen at this level, right? Like it's very hard for Sylas to play against Ahri, who has movement speed, he has charm. She can harass him really well, and he lost all of his HP, but he had help from his support. He had help from his jungle. He stayed even. He was in a good spot to actually grow and be a menace. And they just couldn't get anything going still, regardless of all that. Like Galio did fine in his matchup. Same with bot lane. But again, they literally couldn't do anything in the game. They just didn't have it. And I don't know if they should have like changed things up or not, but like this was just a test by T1 to see just what does 369 have. And yeah, that's just why like they chose the Rumble and they did these bans, and so they learned something about this. And then we go into the last game, and so again, TES is first picking like Sylas. T1 is giving them a Gnar. They're giving them a Gnar ulti, which is obviously like an incredible ulti for Sylas to steal. So this is like kind of like a laugh in the face, like holy shit, you're really gonna pick that? And then we pick Galio, and I'm gonna say right now, Galio is a very, very good counter into Sylas. Like if you ever played the matchup, you can't do anything. Like it's literally a brick wall. We take Xin Zhao as as an additional answer, who, by the way, does not want to play into Gnar or Galio. Just saying, like you don't want to play into that shit. And then they take a Kai'Sa. And it's like, okay, so we're still kind of going for it. It's not like the worst. And then they take a Xayah, and naturally, like it's a Xayah without a Rakan. So you're thinking that's not really that bad at all. We can play this, right? You know, you ban Renata, I guess. Ban Vi. They take a Poppy jungle, and it's like, okay, Poppy jungle's really good. So right now, like, you know, like T1's like looking pretty happy. He's like, oh, shit, we got a Poppy, bro. You take Kennen, Leona, and this is still fine. This is a very playable draft. You know, like maybe Kennen's not exactly super happy the fact that he's ulting and Galio ulti can come down and kind of negate some of what he's doing. And again, you're kind of like all forward into Galio, Xayah, Poppy. Like again, it's not like you kind of want to play a little bit more range in some senses. Yes, Kennen can flank, but they chose this way, and for some odd reason, he went 80 and just absolutely butchered the game. Like, I'm gonna be honest, this is like 369 was already like, he did fine in the first two games. He really did. He did fine. But then he decided to, for fun, 80 Kennen against a comp that just is gonna have 3 champions building HP. So you're not really gonna do much damage to them. And you need to have threat on Xayah to actually play the game, but you don't because you're 80 Kennen. And Kyria is allowed to pick Pyke for fun and win. Whew. I mean, like, after the second game, I already knew this was, like, well over the series. Like, if you get 15 0'd as the LPL second seed, who should be winning, it's lost. And so this is why TES is, like, a hot and cold team. This team can do really well at times, and they can also do really bad. And this was them doing really bad. And it is what it is. You know, it's just how their team is. It's how their players are as a group together. And I thought LNG would not be that because, again, like Gala, Scout, like, these are like players I think of that like will show up, but I guess not. And for TES, they did show up. T1, they showed up. That was very expected by T1. And yeah, I mean, right now I'm sitting at 1-9. Really bad. Unless Genji 3-0's FlyQuest, it'll probably get worse. It probably will get worse. And I'm hoping... I mean, I don't... Obviously, for predictions-wise, it'd be good for me to see Genji 3-0 FlyQuest, but personally, I don't want to see that happen because I'd rather them actually do well. Like, it'd be nice to see FlyQuest put up a fight. And right now, if things go the way they're going, if Genji does beat FlyQuest, this is like this semifinals is gonna be pretty whatever, but this semifinals would obviously be a banger, right? It's a little annoying that it'd be China versus China and like LCK versus LCK. I will say that's kind of lame, you know. This definitely could have been a lot more enjoyable if it wasn't aligned this way. But you can blame TES for just being absolutely like worthless to be able to beat T1, and you know, you can blame HLE for not being able to overcome a strong team. So we'll see, guys. So far, not the best predictions. Definitely, you know, these is still a very close series for HLE BLG. I don't feel too bad about getting it wrong, honestly. Like, it was a really fun series to watch. It really was. And this was definitely definitely the right coin flip to choose on. And just, you know, like I said, just applying some ideas behind how the players stack up versus each other, and we'll see what FlyQuest cooks up for tomorrow. You know, maybe they'll have some really good picks and it turns the whole thing around. We'll see. Thanks for watching, guys. And I got one more video for quarterfinals. Then do one for semis predictions, which probably won't take too long. And then I'm gone for vacation. So thanks for watching, guys. See ya.